The Matt Wade, welcome to the episode, mate. Really glad you could join me for what I think is going to be an interesting conversation. So thanks for jumping on the call.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Daniel. Appreciate it.
Now, for everybody watching and listening, because I probably won't do you justice, you don't need that much of an introduction, but tell everybody a little bit about yourself, what it is you're doing, what's keeping you busy at the moment.
Yeah, so I'm a Microsoft 365 sort of generalist, but I talk about a lot or work through a lot of the apps within the ecosystem, but Teams is sort of my priority these days. But I started out as an engineer, civil engineer, and then worked as a mechanical engineer, and then kind of fell into IT by mistake. SharePoint rolled out in my organization back in 2010, I think it was now, and we had SharePoint 2007. Turned out I liked enterprise content management and websites and other nerdy stuff like that, and ended up transferring over to the internal IT group and did that for a number of years. Bounced around a little bit, spent some time in the Caribbean, in Virginia, and then came back to the Upstate New York region where I grew up. And right now I'm full-time admin for a local organization, and I do a bunch of blogging, speaking, writing, things like that, video production, stuff like that on the side.
Yeah, you do. Obviously, being Microsoft MVP as well, you're producing a lot of content for the community, and you do a lot of work in that area as well. Now, your bio, tell me how somebody out of the nuclear power design field falls into SharePoint.
Well, every place has to store their stuff somewhere, right? So, it was just an internal move from, I think we were using like Dreamweaver and, just standard.
Dreamweaver.
Yeah, just, internal intranet kind of building processes. And then they bought SharePoint. I have no idea what the, process was to choose that or to purchase it, but installed 2007. And then that's sort of where I got into SharePoint. We needed a place to do some better collaboration than what was offered in shared drives. And then built out a bunch of internal, basically knowledge resources, documents that range back like decades, like back to when my parents were kids kind of thing. Identifying, our components, our designs, our work scopes, all of that kind of stuff, being able to organize that with metadata and get people to the information they needed quickly.
Yeah. Hey, now, you're back on the conference circuit. Recently, the Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference in Las Vegas. You did a session there all around, or it was titled Bringing Technology, Business and Community Together. Tell us a little bit about what that was all about. What was the contents of that session?
So it was essentially pushing really hard on the modern meeting experience and getting people organized and sort of learning from their mistakes. I think that a lot of the world got pulled kicking and screaming into Zoom and Citrix and or not Citrix, Cisco and Microsoft Teams, and not really knowing how best to do it. I think it's one of those things where people just assume, well, it's like email, right? I know how to do that and I'll just do it, but nobody ever actually talks about it, and they don't think about the etiquette of it or the best practices or just keeping things professional and clean. And that was really sort of the aim there, is to kind of point people to all those resources that are out there, all the feature sets that come with Teams these days, in meetings especially. The difference between a standard or private meeting and a channel meeting, and why you might use either. The impact of meeting recordings and how they're stored in SharePoint and OneDrive now. Those kinds of devils in the details kind of things, because people don't think about it, they just do it, and then people will complain later on, and you'll see a TikTok of somebody slamming their screen shut after they hang up because I'm so glad that's done. And it's like, it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. Are you finding that a lot? Obviously, people, as you said, may have been dragged kicking and screaming into, these online tools, and especially Microsoft Teams. And I've spoken about it a number of times where traditionally, people's entry point into Office 360 or Microsoft 365 has been, migrate your email in and then we start using the other tools. But now it's kind of gone being led from a Teams experience and meetings and chat and being able to work remotely and connect remotely and things like that. And people have started to, use Teams, whether or not it's the right way, the wrong way, or that type of thing. And now we're kind of circling back a little bit now to almost cleaning up and now trying to implement some best practices.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting how you're absolutely right that email was always Exchange migrations were always the easy one. That it's kind of I'm not an Exchange guy and I don't do migrations, so I don't want to belittle people, but it was always expressed very clearly from people that know how this stuff works that the migrations of Exchange was like a lot easier because Exchange is just so online is just so similar to on-prem, and you kind of do a plug and play. Versus SharePoint was a lot harder because you could do a lift and shift, but you probably didn't organize things very well the first time. So here's an opportunity to learn from that, right? And email, we don't really learn from it. We just continue our bad habits. And it's because it's been around for ubiquitous for 30 years and around for 50. But I think with Teams, it's interesting because you could have gotten pulled into Microsoft 365 a couple different ways in Teams. It might have been meetings or it might have been chat. The hardest part about Teams, though, is the team. And it's actually very similar to SharePoint, which is, kind of apropos because every team has a SharePoint site in the background. So if you had Zoom in your organization and that was your preferred video conferencing tool, but you had a Microsoft 365 license, you might use Teams for chat, and that's it. Now, if you do use meetings, you don't have Zoom or you don't have GoToMeeting or another competitor, you might get pulled in just for meetings. And it's kind of funny talking to people as to like how they view the Microsoft 365 brand because Outlook to them is literally just email and like, yeah, okay, it's Microsoft, but like, I don't really think about it that way. And Teams, again, even though the word Microsoft is in it, they just look at it as, oh, that's the video conferencing tool that I got pulled into. And I haven't had any time or care to go exploring to see what else those buttons are on the left side app bar. Right. And I think it's just kind of interesting because no matter what, it's always the team aspect, which is really the value that Microsoft Teams brings, is having, those permission protected workspaces with all that stuff, conversations, channels, tabs, all that integration. You have some integrations in meetings. We're getting more. You don't really have it in chat. It's there, but it's not great. So it's just kind of funny that the best features really of Teams are the ones that people don't get pulled into because they don't have a corollary to it. And getting them into that is as hard as getting them into SharePoint sometimes.
And obviously, Teams is, as you mentioned, a very large platform, and there's so much that you can do inside of Microsoft Teams. And you're very well known for an infographic as well around sort of what to use when and that type of thing, and the periodic table of Microsoft 365. You also just recently, fairly recently, released a book around Teach Yourself Visually Microsoft Teams. How did that come about? I mean, is it from the work that you're doing with or seeing in the community and the work you're doing internally as well, that there's a really big need for education as to what Microsoft Teams can do?
So I think the sessions that I typically do for conferences are generally around. There's not a much better word I can find in the language other than etiquette, right? And it's the yes, chat can do X, but should you do X, right? Maybe you should do Y. And that's why I put together a bunch of a couple of different ebooks with one of the partners out there, Microsoft partners, actually, here's a copy of one of them. So, the guide to essentially, meetings, doing meetings right. And this and another one on just etiquette and Teams in general kind of broke out into those sessions that I typically try to cover. And there's just so much content and so much good information to share. People really liked it. And it's like, well, I can expand on a lot of this stuff. So I had reached out to a peer of mine out in Germany who I've never met him before. We chat, we have a bit of a mentor-mentee relationship. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about writing this book. I've already got a bunch of it drafted. I've never gone through the publishing process or proposal or whatever. But there's a book from 2013 called, I think it was SharePoint, Point and Click or whatever. But it was from Microsoft Press. It was all very colorful, right? Screenshots, step by step. And I got in contact with the author there, and he pointed me to his publisher at the time, and I got in contact with that person and threw in a proposal, and they accepted it. So this is actually part of a series, just kind of like the For Dummies book series. Yep. So this is probably not nearly as well known, but just, I don't know, the production value of this is just so good, in my opinion. Like, it came out beautifully. And I'm very much a stickler on that. Like, if a lot of these publishers put out really, really thin paper and, all black and white, this is not that. And it was just an opportunity to cover all those things that, all right, you want to know how to do X, look in the table of contents. Like, you ain't sitting down and reading that, right? Nobody's going to read that before they go to bed. But it's a good Bible that they can pick up and go, I want to figure out, how do I do PowerPoint Live in Teams? And most of the books on Teams don't cover much on meetings. So we actually spent about a third of the book length on meetings. And most books, when I was doing my research, maybe a chapter out of 8 to 12 max, which like meetings are hard, man. Like I don't know how people can think that it's just super simple. So we spent hours and hours getting screenshots of what the meetings, I mean, everything, but the meetings especially look like. And it was just a fun process. Learned a lot because he knew a lot that I didn't and vice versa. So we were really teaching each other. And then we were using the opportunity to say, click this, click this, click this. And then you have an option or an opportunity to put in like how should I do this? Or what's a tip and a trick that I can include here? So it's not just this is how you do it. It's also this is how you best do it potentially. Or here's an idea. Here's some inspiration, because too many people go into these things and look at them and they're essentially sterile. It's just click this, click this, click this, done. And it's like, yeah, you can send a message that way, but maybe you should use a subject line when you start a conversation in a Teams channel, right? Like you would do that in an email, right?
That's one of my biggest pain points, I reckon.
Oh, yeah.
Just chat messages without any structure, without any subject. I know, exactly right. So if we talk about meetings a little, or meeting etiquette, I guess, what are some things that that you see that people are doing, or not incorrectly, but some best practices around running successful or good engaging meetings inside Microsoft Teams?
So I think first off, people just assume that running a meeting is a thing that humans are trained to do and like understand how to do it from the womb, and that's absolutely not the case. So whether you have a good meeting or not really doesn't matter on the tool. It really matters on like, did you put together an agenda and provide it to people ahead of time? Did you link it in your meeting invitation as opposed to attaching it so that the next time inevitably there's going to be an agenda update, you have to send the meeting update out like 10 times. Making sure that there's somebody there to like manage the meeting. And if you're in a larger one, especially if there's people presenting, you're jumping through agenda items, changing roles, right? So if you can demote everybody or keep everybody as an attendee except for the people that are presenting, and then actually actively change their status as they're presenting, there are way too many people in the world, even ones that are pretty used to using Teams, that will click the share button for whatever reason, I have no idea, but they take over from somebody else, and it's just embarrassing and unprofessional, right? Dealing with the meeting options and like setting attendees to hard mute, and then allowing people to come off when they raise their hand so they can ask a question, but you don't get all that background noise that's super distracting. And of course, when you're the one making all the noise, you're literally the only one in the meeting that doesn't know that you're making a noise, right? So it's that kind of stuff that I think people don't know the feature set that they have. So when everybody gets in and the default is everybody's a presenter, that's fine for a 5 to 15 person meeting, let's say. But the minute you break like 25 or 30, like a 30 person meeting is a large meeting and a 300 person meeting is a large meeting. And there's really not much difference between the two, because, if 15 people out of 30 are making a lot of noise and you can't control that, and 150 people out of 300 are making a lot of noise, logistically, there's not much of a difference on the user side of things, right? Like it's a bad experience, right? So those are the kinds of things that, we spend a lot of time talking about in the book to really just be strategic, think about it. Don't just schedule and join and like wing it. Like you don't have to sit down for hours and plan out your meeting, but spend 25 minutes like being strategic,
Yeah, and do you think, a lot of those things could possibly be people's awareness of actually what you can and can't do in meetings and the tool set and things like that, I guess, as well, which I think is a from a user adoption side and a change management side is something that's very, very important as well. It's not just I've seen it happen before where, organizations have rolled out Microsoft Teams, and that's kind of where they've left it. So it needs to really be sort of a continuous process as well about, what's coming out and, new features that are coming in, best practices, all that sort of stuff, which I think is super important as well. And you also run, which I think is amazing, because a lot of people don't get the information to them there about the roadmap and what's coming and things like that. And you do a podcast with Sean as well around that sort of stuff as well. And that's super important as well.
Yeah, just knowing what's coming. Because the major upside to M365 is that you're going to get new features reasonably quickly. And of course, after the pandemic started, especially the team side of things, especially the meeting side, they got a bit of a kick in the pants saying, you're really far behind Zoom right now. And nobody's heard of Zoom before until now. Yeah. And what the hell? You're an enterprise solution, builder, you should be all over this. So the downside is that it seems like everything's always changing constantly. But at the same time, considering that step change of, when you have to do a SharePoint 2013 to 2016 upgrade, or, you're rolling out the new version of Office to 2019 from 2016, that's a big step change. And like everybody gets annoyed by the fact that how come Outlook looks different, right? Like if you
Yeah.
do it slowly with minor changes here and there, you just kind of let people know in newsletters, it settles easier, I think. And it gives the people that want it and are kind of chomping at the bit, like they can get it.
Mm. So, I mean, you're working internally with an organisation now as well. So, how do you manage, or how have you seen the best approach to manage the change in Microsoft 365 and alerting users or informing users about what's coming?
So, regardless of my current location, all the places I've worked at since I've had O365 as a thing, I think the biggest thing is that O360 M365, depending on your license type, of course.
Yeah.
Too many places assume that it's like one person can manage this because it's one entity, and it's like, yeah, but guys, if you were on-prem right now, you'd have SharePoint, you'd have Exchange, you'd have Skype, you'd have the Office, apps, right? And those would all be different teams, most likely, depending on the size of the organization. But most likely there'd be people that have the various skill sets in different things. And I think because a lot of places will split up the responsibilities, it's the biggest thing is the backside, is the IT side of things, and making sure that those people are communicating effectively to ensure that, like, hey, did you know that this thing is coming to Teams meetings soon? Like, when breakout rooms came out, for example, like that's a big feature change, and that requires a lot of change, at least training, or at least pointing people to the right resources if you're not going to provide it internally somehow. And I think making sure that, hey, on the Exchange side of things, if you're using sensitivity or labels or like any sort of security compliance stuff, like how that applies to the rest of the experience. Because now anytime you open up a file or create a file in Teams, you're going to be asked for a sensitivity label. And if that compliance person isn't talking to the Teams people, like that's going to be a bit of a surprise when the Teams people get all these questions about how come I can't even edit a file in here because it's making me, do this thing, or it won't let me open it up in the desktop app right now because it's, whatever. So I think the communication on the backside is important, and then being able to define what those changes are and finding the appropriate method of communicating it, whether it's an all hands email, or if it's just one of those nice to haves or nice to knows and throw it in a newsletter, hosting local trainings, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Now, the dust has settled a little bit, I guess, now on Microsoft Ignite, which some time ago now. All the fanfare and everything that happens around Ignite, announcements and everything like that. One of the marquee announcements was this new app called Microsoft Loop. Now, give me before we dive into that a little bit deeper, give me your first thoughts on Microsoft Loop.
So I think that Loop is going to be the next paradigm changer within the Microsoft 365 space, and it's going to follow up after Teams having been the last paradigm changer. There were a lot of things announced at Ignite. Some of them are marketing fluff, and some of them are,
Yeah.
You're not going to make this work. Don't try. But I think Loop is the one out there that we've been waiting for it for so long, because it's been talked about now for, 2 or 3 years. They've been showing demos. And the fact that you can now centrally locate information and access it in multiple places, and no matter where you open it, it's going to open up the most accurate or the most recent version of that, I think is like groundbreaking.
And who do you think, in your opinion, who do you think is going to, benefit from this app?
So I know that it's an app, right? So Loop has it's going to have its separate app, but then it has its workspaces in the app. But it's really the components, right? And I know people compare it a lot to Notion, which I totally get. It looks just like Notion, an existing app that does a lot of the same thing. But Notion doesn't have the ecosystem to build into the way that Microsoft does. So when you build a graph or a chart, right? Which this is further down the line, so like we still have to wait for it. But when you have a database or like a table of data and a chart built off of that, and you have to include that information in an email to the CEO, a letter to your customer, a presentation to the C-suite, and I don't know, some sort of spreadsheet to reference the data directly. The fact that you can have that now in one place, whether you create it in the Loop app or you create it in the local app and then just reference it elsewhere, means that you don't have to worry about oh wait, we have this one graph out there 4 times. We made an update based on new data. Now I have to go back and make sure we cover all 4 of those things. And the fact that you don't have to communicate, anytime there's a communication pathway necessary to get something done between one person and another, that's a breaking point, right? A potential loss point. And Loop makes it so that you don't have to do that. So as long as somebody else is referencing that in a document someplace, or an email or whatever else, it's going to update whenever the person opens it. They're going to see up-to-date information. And I think it's like the next gen of, not that it's that notable, but like being able to edit and delete messages in Teams, I think is one of the things that makes it stand out from email, because now you can actually correct something that's invalid or has been updated, so that whenever somebody goes to it, it's going to be accurate if it's important information that people use. And email can't do that. Well, this is like 10 steps beyond that, where
next level.
It's a lot of data. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of stuff, whether it's voting poll lists, whether it's a task list or whatever else. But I just think that kind of information being available across multiple platforms built right into the experiences is going to be just awesome.
Yeah. Do you think there's going to be confusion around, and back to this question of what to use when? When do I use Loop? When do I use Teams? When do, that type of thing?
So I think, I've already seen plenty of confusion on, how is it different from Whiteboard, or what is it compared to Mocha or Outlook boards, whatever they ended up calling them. And that's why I don't really like the fact that it's being called like an app. Like I would almost consider it like smart art or word, or a word art, or like a chart in the various apps, where we've had that for years. You can create a chart in PowerPoint, Excel, Word, probably Outlook. Haven't done it in a long time, but like, you're adding a piece, right? They call it a component. I like that. I don't like their marketing fluff, which was I think they called it the quantum of modern productivity or something like that. It was somebody patted themselves in the back. It was hilarious.
Yeah. Spent a lot of time.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah. Those live components, the portability, I've been playing around with a bit myself as well, and especially for, in meetings as well, being able to have those live components as, whether it's your agenda, but then oftentimes there's follow-up things or task lists or things like that need to be created. And, we might fire up Planner or To Do or something like that. But now, I can see a really big shift in how meetings are run as well, and how information is shared from the meeting, post meeting, with those live components.
Definitely. So I think one of the pain points that people will see, and this is very much a first world problem, but it is a problem, right? People note it, is when you want to send somebody in a chat or in a message in Teams and say something that's proposed, wording that's proposed, or whatever. When I send a message, I can edit my own message, but nobody else can edit my message. So if you actually want to put a proposal out there, like just today, I sent somebody a draft of an email that I was going to send out and wanted that person to review it. My only real way to do it was to create a Word doc, which is just so clunky, right? And then create it in OneDrive. It's in my miscellaneous folder, so it's filed away forever. I'll never see it again, and that folder is basically useless. Send it to him in chat. What do you think? He makes his edits, and that file doesn't need to exist anymore. But I shouldn't have had to do that in the first place. I could have just used a fluid component or a loop component, drop the text in, and he could make the changes there. Now, I'm not going to see track changes, at least not yet. I don't know if that's even on the roadmap for this. But without it, even so, the end result is the end result. And I think, like you said, with meetings, so chat in meetings is a big deal. And then the agenda, right? So if I send out an agenda to somebody, they can't update it unless the email, if the agenda was in the email and I wrote it up in the email, you can't do that. And now that they have the agenda loop component built into Teams meetings, that's great, because now other people can suggest or add things to it. So you have sort of a live experience.
Now, if we circle back a little bit around to Teams, this does, probably will flow into Loop as well. But there's a lot of things that can go wrong, I guess, in a rollout and team, or specifically Teams adoption. What have you seen in your experience the biggest challenges when organizations are implementing Microsoft Teams?
I think the connection to SharePoint, I kind of wish Microsoft made that more obvious, because I don't think, I mean, people just don't know when they start. They're looking at files in their files tab, or that they're being shared from chat and seeing, it's there. So great. Not knowing that they have the full-fledged feature set of a SharePoint site behind it, and they can do more, like add lists and add libraries and things like that. I just think it's so vast. Like, I really do believe Teams is like the new, basically, workplace OS, because it's just bringing everything in, that it's just extremely difficult to get a big picture point through, and you kind of have to start small and work your way through and like talk through the common use cases that are internal. So, talk about the fact that you have chat, right? That's basically text message or Skype for Business being replaced. You have meetings. That's basically Skype for Business or Zoom, right? And then you have these Teams workspaces, which is basically like a collaborative email experience, right? But you have a central place to store your files, and then dive into the, okay, you want to host multiple document libraries. You want to be able to have metadata. You want to be able to do tracking lists, things like that. Like, oh, look at these apps that you can add into that. Oh, you also happen to use Jira, right? You can do this integration. You want to include a bot. You can do that too. I generally point people now, like I used to write a lot of internal documentation for most of my organizations, because Microsoft was always just not great.
Microsoft?
Yeah, Microsoft was just not great, but now it is. Like their training and help portal is like really, really good. And I just kind of point people to that and say, here's the M365 Learning Pathways site template installed internally, and that always gets updated. Now you have to throw some caveats in there, here and there. It's a site, so you can make updates to it and say, like, we don't have this feature for whatever reason, or we recommend that you don't use this feature, whatever. But I think pushing like the company way, and I know governance is a big deal, but I sometimes think that word is overused and also like overhyped, as in like, it doesn't mean what I think a lot of people think it means. But kind of aligning like governance or guidance to say, don't give people choice, because choice is difficult. And if they have choice, they might choose the wrong thing for arbitrary or no good reason. And if you can at least guide them in one direction, they just, if you hit a fork in the road and they don't know which way to go, tell them which way to go, right? Like, this is the way we do it. You can do it the other way. You're welcome to do so, but you're going to have to do a little research into understanding what the outcomes of that decision are, kind of thing.
Yeah, and do you see? I mean, when Teams first came out, there was I guess confusion again a little bit, I guess, around SharePoint versus Teams. What do I use? Do I use SharePoint for this? Do I use Teams for that? There was the messaging around Teams being the place for your closed, let's say, closed group of people, or your project team, or your department, or things like that. And now, I guess we're kind of seeing a little bit of a shift, a little bit, where we can now, obviously with Viva Connections, bring the company portal or the intranet portal inside of Teams as well. So going to your point around Teams being almost like an operating system as such, are you seeing also now then? How do you see that playing out from a SharePoint side and Teams?
I think SharePoint's getting less play. So its visibility is higher. It's just that nobody knows what it is.
And like we used to try and hide. I'm not sure about you, but we used to try and hide Yammer in that way, right? Yeah. So Yammer being part of the intranet, you've got the social, and you've got the collaboration or the social interaction that way, using Yammer inside of SharePoint, but people didn't really know they were using Yammer. And now it's kind of a similar thing inside Teams. Here's your company intranet. Yeah. It's actually SharePoint, but you don't really know a SharePoint.
Yeah, and I've got a bit of a bone to pick with the whole Viva branding. I think it's just like literally everything within the four modules are existing or were coming anyway products, and like it's really just being rebranded to catch a different audience and not just have IT people purchase this stuff. So, when HR or, whoever cares about this term of the employee experience sees Viva and says, oh, that's great. Like, we need to have this central communication hub, and it should be in this central collaboration hub that we have. And like, there should be communities involved too. And it's like, yeah, SharePoint, Teams, and Yammer. And like, they just rebundled it. And there's no non-cynical way to look at this. Unfortunately, it's just so like, I don't know. I think it's I have the table of Office 365 up here on my wall, and I just look at it and it's like, yeah, everything's split up very nicely. And it's like, oh no, now there's these like, it's like, I don't know if you ever have worked any construction or architectural engineering kind of stuff, but when you have drawings and somebody goes and builds the stuff, they will update the drawings with pencil or paper. And they call them as-builds. And they usually use red pen, and they will create bubbles around things and that's what I feel like. It's just there's bubbles now around all these different apps to say, oh, this is Viva Connections, and this is Viva Topics, and this is Viva Learning, and it kills me, man.
Yeah, I know it's even this the talk of it being targeted or audience targeted, or you're going to see what's relevant to you. I mean, that's always been,
but that's Office Graph, right? Like, this is
yeah.
Which nobody in the user side should ever have to know that anyway. It's a Facebook feed, right? Like, or it's a website that knows what you like, right? Like, or what you should see, or security terms or whatever, which is SharePoint plus Yammer. I don't get it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now, Matt, as we wrap things up, you, as I mentioned at the start of the episode, you do and you produce a lot of content for the community. Where can people find you? What's the best place to follow your content, and just get engaged with you?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say right now my most active is on YouTube. So you can check out the Jump 2365 YouTube channel. That's JUMPTO, not the number 2. And that's where Sean Bugler and I do the weekly sort of a roadmap overview of what's coming or what was said to be coming, and toss in some opinion here and there. I put out some videos. I haven't been doing as much production on videos as of late. Work has been pretty busy, and the book stuff has been as well. I actually have a second book coming out, I think this week, but I'm not entirely sure on the timing. But that's the Office 365 All-in-One for Dummies. I wrote, or co-authored, or supported a portion of that. And then, so that's been big on the side. But find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. My username is that Matt Wade, pretty much on every platform. And you'll find me there.
Very good. I'll post all those in the show notes as well, so everybody can find you and follow you and engage with your content as well. One last thing. Well, it's probably too long to be one last thing, but if from what you've seen about what is coming, or what has just been released, what's from a Microsoft Teams perspective, what's exciting you? What are you looking forward to?
Oh, I mean, I want to say it's Loop, because Loop is just a component within Teams, right? I really, really, really have. I don't want to just say high hopes or expectations. Like, I think that Loop is already proving itself and how valuable that can be in a really, really strong way. Now, can you access it through its own app? Yeah, but it's an app built right into the toolbar of messages and in your meeting agenda. So to me, I think the way that Teams has kind of changed the world between 2017 and 2020, I think Loop is going to do maybe not that big, because you're not going to have 250 million people every day using Loop or Loop components, but I think it has a major impact on, content management. It's kind of going to flip it on its head, and, compliance and how we deal with it, but it's going to make things a lot easier for people to do work. But man, is it going to be fun for like compliance folks? Because what happens when an email is going to have a dynamic piece of data in it, right? Which I guess adaptive cards have been there for a while, but not to this extent. Where, oh man, it's just what's a lawyer going to say when they have to pull up an e-discovery for an email that's like made up all of loops?
Yeah, yes, I know. It's certainly going to be an interesting time. So, Matt, really appreciate you taking the time, jumping on the call. It was a great chat. So, thank you very much.
Yeah, much appreciated, Daniel.